indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I want to thank Max Owens for leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Max. This regular meeting of the Township Council is being held in accordance with the scheduled meetings of the Township Council established and adopted by the Township Council, which schedule designated the time, date, and place of this meeting. Adequate public notice of this meeting has been provided pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act. We are using electronic amplifying recording device in order to obtain a clear and audible record, and request all those wishing to speak be recognized and state your name and address directly into the microphone. The recording device will be solely utilized by the Township Clerk's Office and shall be the official record of the Township Council meetings. Madam Clerk, may I have the roll call, please?
Mr. Hodgson?
Present.
Mr. Owens?
Present.
Mrs. Stubbs?
Present.
Mrs. Winters?
Here.
Mr. Mignon?
Here.
Mrs. Trotto?
Here.
Mr. Mercado?
Present.
Mr. Carlemere?
Here.
Mr. Cardis?
Here.
Mr. Lechner? Chief
Here. Here.
Harkins?
Here.
Mr. Chadwell?
Here. Before we go into the public portion, I just want to remind anyone that attends our meetings and going forward into the new year that there is a resolution that's on our bulletin board there that talks about the rule of order of our meeting. Our first public portion is 15 minutes and speakers are allowed 3 minutes. After 15 minutes, I will be shutting down the first public portion. And the second public portion is for 30 minutes, and that each speaker is allowed 5 minutes during that time period. And after that 30-minute period, we will close the second public portion. So I just ask friends and neighbors, just be mindful of others when they're up here speaking. There's some folks that also want to speak as well. With that, I open up the first public portion. Anyone wishing to speak, please raise your hand. This is on agenda items only. Mr. Sweet.
Sam Sweet from Ariel. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
With regards to Resolution 1912-344, the resolution to make budget transfers, I know it's up there. Any chance that council would consider tabling it to the next meeting since it was just put up and it wasn't available for the public to review and ask appropriate questions?
Mr. Sweet, we have to make those transfers before the end of the year. Is that correct, Mr. Cardis?
Absolutely.
That's why we meet on the second. In previous years, probably we've been doing so the last 9 years. But prior to that, we only had one meeting in the month of December, and we've met the second time in the month of December because sometimes there's things like this that pop up that we need to attend to. So no, we have to. I'm not interested in tabling that. You're more than welcome to take a look at it and ask additional questions. But no, these transfers need to take place before the end of the year.
Okay. Quickly glancing at it, I noticed that there was, and I apologize for not being totally prepared because, like I said, that was just put up today and it wasn't available online to review. There's a $675,000 transfer to group insurance.
Yes.
Wasn't that taken out when we did the night, or the budget was short by $1 million? In June or so, the state came back and said your budget's short by $1 million, and you maneuvered money around. Mr. Cardis.
I'm not familiar with what you're talking
I think you're saying that when our budget, when we sent our budget up to Division of Local Finance, that we had to move some money around in our budget.
but I don't think that had anything to do with health insurance.
I believe it, some of the money that was removed was, you said that we had overfunded our health insurance.
I don't recall saying that.
Okay, because,
And we're self-funded, so in the beginning of the year, we estimate what our needs are in terms of our budget. In this particular instance, those needs were less than what was needed, so that's why we're transferring money into that line item.
can you run that by me again one more time, please?
We're self-funded, So in the beginning of the year, we don't, unlike a fully insured health insurance plan, you don't get a set of premiums based on family, husband, wife, parent, child, single. We do that for the Chapter 78 contributions that the employees make. But when you're self-funded, you estimate where you're going to be in terms of the aggregate attachment point, which is where the insurance kicks in, and where they anticipate your claims to be. So there is a little bit of guessing involved with what the actual number should be. And that's for both medical and prescription. We're self-funded. We've been self-funded since 1992. We were only fully insured for a period of 1 year in 2002, and that was due to multiple claims. We're estimating we saved millions of dollars by being self-funded.
Okay, but when we're moving $675,000 into group insurance, does that mean there was a shortfall?
Yes, absolutely.
And we're moving it from, it looks like, again, I apologize if my number's incorrect, $374,000 for sanitation? We're moving it from there?
That's correct also, that there's money that comes back to the township from the GTMUA based on the audit that they do. And because we're selling product and the global agreement calls for a calculation of the amount of money that's coming back to the township. In this particular instance, I believe it was 241,000 came back. So we did a return to appropriation on that, and that allowed us to have additional monies there that we could transfer over.
Okay, thank you. If I may, at the end, I'm going to take a quick look at that a little more. If I have any other questions, may I come back and re-ask them?
If we have time during the first public portion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Heimball.
Pete Heinbaum, Morningstar Court. Good evening.
Good evening.
I wasn't going to ask a question about the transfers, but regarding the group insurance, back when the budget was approved for this year, and the state told us they wouldn't accept the Nike-based sale, we had to rejigger some things around the budget to make it work. We took a big chunk out of group insurance at that point, right? But on the budget line item for group insurance, I think that's what we were trying to ask.
Very well could have been.
And now we're putting it back in. Okay, I think that's what was being questioned. Resolution 337, I have a question. Both bids were rejected for the hockey rink project. What was inappropriate about Area 51 landscaping's bid submission?
Mr. Carr, you want to answer that?
Mr. Carlin,
Oh, Mr. Carter, I'm sorry.
you want to just answer it, or you want me?
I don't have the recollection.
Okay, so Area 51 did not submit a bid bond, did not have the IRAN clause. It was deficient in many ways that a bid has to be in compliance with. Therefore, it had to be rejected. The other one's being rejected because it's well above our
That's
budget.
all that, yeah. So what's the next step regarding this project?
Because it's
Bid-
gone
the bid of
out
this
twice. The first time, I believe there were no bidders. The second time, we're rejecting for cause. So now that we've been out twice, we can now sit down and negotiate with contractors to get the best price and get the best product.
With anyone?
Yes, basically anyone.
But
I
the-
think they'd have to be qualified. I wouldn't just,
Right, oh, sure. This Area 51 looked like a very, other than the administrative deficiencies, looked like a very favorable bid. Is that someone we're going to, look like in the best interest of the town, as long as they're qualified to pursue
it may
them
very
further?
well be that we can
Okay.
go back to them. I don't know. I'd have to talk to Mr. Carlemere at length about that.
If those comments are consistent, sorry, but that was the conversation that we had sometime last week.
But just based on their bid, it would seem in our best interest to pursue them and get them right.
And they
Yeah.
do have a history of doing this type of work.
Do they?
Yeah, it's possible.
And they submitted a bad administratively. I thought maybe they were a first-time bidder or something based on their mistakes that they made. But that's a shame, because that would look like a good favorable bid. Another question. Resolution 338. Could just give me a general idea of what the police department were hoping to acquire through this Department of Defense taking advantage of Department of Defense?
So this enables us to start looking for potential equipment. We've had this throughout for many years now. Sometimes it's a little bit manpower intensive to go through the systems, but we have someone dedicated. One of the captains here has gotten trained up on it. I was trained up on it some time ago and in the past, but enabled for us to move forward with even getting approved to look at stuff. This resolution has to go through. So we don't have anything targeted as of yet. The stuff comes online as it goes out of service with the military, but it's open, as you see, there's all kinds of stuff that we could potentially
Good.
get, so.
Good, I'm glad we're taking advantage of that.
That's at no cost.
It's at no
Yeah,
cost.
it's no cost
yes.
except
Yeah.
delivery and repair,
Correct.
maintenance and training and things.
Correct.
Yeah. I'm glad we're taking advantage of it. Thank
Yep.
you. So this is the first time our township has been it's been a part of this
In the
program.
past, years past, we had acquired ballistic helmets that our tactical team had used in the past, but we have not acquired anything within the last few years. Although we have looked, when we looked in the past, there was nothing that was worth putting out any effort to get. So we're hopeful to be able to stay on top and find some stuff that we can do.
Being mindful of my time limit, I'll,
Thank you, Mr. Highball. Have a great evening. Anyone else? Ms. Coyne?
Denise Coyne, Shoes Landing Road.
Hello, Ms. Quinn.
Hello. R 1912-345. Can you tell me how this comes about, how it gets initiated to look at an area for redevelopment?
Mr. Lechner, could you tackle that since you're a planner? You can speak more eloquently than I can on this.
Basically, the council, this resolution authorizes the planning board to conduct the preliminary investigation for an area of redevelopment, which is statutory requirement.
Right, I understand.
So that's sent to the planning board. The planning board takes it under advisement. They vote on that, and then they would move forward with that with either you or an outside planner or consultant to work on that plan.
T&M Associates
T&M.
is the planning firm that's doing the study. When the study's completed, there'll be a public hearing and at the planning board, and the planning board will make the recommendation to council, and then council, they wish to move forward with the planning board recommendation and adopt the resolution.
Right, I understand the process. My question revolved around how does it get initiated? Who goes out and decides that these lots should be an area of redevelopment?
Well, council has a redevelopment planner, T&M Associates. They made a recommendation. They provided a proposal to council. That proposal was brought forth to council on a November work session. And they agreed to move forward with it. And so this is the resolution authorizing them to begin.
So TM Associates drives around and looks at all the property or looks at maps or something and decides which
It's a
areas?
Specific area it's a specific area, basically an area on the Black Horse Pike bounded on the north by Marshall Avenue, on the south by Davis Lakeland Road, on the west.
Yeah, I looked up where it's at. I was just wondering how it comes about, how it even starts. Who does that?
The planners at T&M Associates, they have to follow the New Jersey statutes for local redevelopment and housing law.
But we give them the authority to decide which areas in the township
They make
should be
recommendations-
redevelopment areas,
They make recommendations to the planning board.
and we give them the authority to do that. The township does.
Township council gives them the authority to conduct the study.
Yes, I understand.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand your question.
My question is, how does it even get started? Who initiates giving T&M the authority to go out and look at this area to begin with? How does that even come about?
Because when the RFQs go out, as they already have, and when we award contracts at the reorganization, that is one of the contracts that we're going to award. We're going to award again.
No,
And
I
so
don't
that-
think you're
that-
understanding my question. I'm asking, how does this even,
Because they're making
be considered.
recommendations. You're saying, how are they given authority? It's not giving them authority. It's saying to the professional, give us the recommendations that you believe are in the best interest of the Township of Gloucester and its residents. And that's what they're doing. They're coming before council and giving their recommendations. Council can say, we're not interested.
yeah, I understand that, but are they looking at maps or something of the township and saying,
Absolutely, absolutely.
okay, so they look at the maps, T&M does, and they decide which
Absolutely.
areas. Okay, so they looked at a map and determined that this area would probably qualify as an area for redevelopment, right?
Yes, they're qualified to gather all that information.
Right, and they do a study and it comes back, I
and make
understand
an-
that.
a
Okay, so-
recommendation.
Mr. Lechner, isn't this property right below Blackwood West redevelopment? And by College Drive and by Lakeland redevelopment?
It's in that vicinity.
So there's Blackwood West would be in the north, Lakeland would be,
Blackwood West ends at Meadows Diner.
and that's being extended, from what I understand, farther south. And then Lakeland's to the east and College Drive is to the west. So it's like completely surrounded by redevelopment areas, right?
Pretty much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coyne. Anyone else? Mr. Krug? Mr.
Paul
Krug, it
Krug,
looks like-
Blackwood.
I'm sorry, it looks like Mr. Krug will be our last speaker.
As far as the time policy is concerned with citizens' time limits, is it unreasonable that the citizen request that time be paused when council speaks for an extended period of time?
Well, the portion, there are other municipalities that when they have their public comment, and I'm sure there's people who've attended meetings and other entities in the town where they'll ask a question and they'll talk for 3 minutes, and maybe that question's responded to, and maybe it's not. That's, I believe my colleagues and I, if you have a question, we're going to respond to your question and help you with that. But if we also could just let you speak for 3 minutes and provide a comment without a reply. So if you ask a question, I think all of us would like to answer your question. But I think that when people ask a question, they should be concise in asking that.
Certainly. But if someone was to request that while council speaks, that time be paused, would that be unreasonable?
No, not unreasonable, but we're also not, Mr. Cars is not going to be stopping and starting back and forth. But that request can be made, and I'll take it under advisement.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. With regard to Resolution 345, from the meeting on December 9th, if my recollection is correct, I thought the entire township had a tax abatement and was a redevelopment area. So how does this specific area differ, or how would it differ?
Mr. Lechner, explain the difference between okay.
The whole township is not in a redevelopment area. The whole township is in a rehabilitation area.
Can you explain the difference?
Well, the main, we're talking about a whole New Jersey statute, so I can paraphrase. The two main items that a redevelopment area designation allows is an area of condemnation. And it allows the township to enter into a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes.
And rehabilitation? What would-
In a rehabilitation, you have the tax abatement, but you're not able to go into like a 30-year tax abatement or a pilot, like, and you're not allowed to condemn property.
Okay.
That's the two main criteria.
Appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll close our public portion. Next, we have our resolutions consent agenda. Any council member would like to have any of the items removed from the consent agenda, please speak up. Hearing none, I entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Hurst. Thank you, Ms. Stubbs. On the question, roll call, please.
Mr. Hutchison?
Yes.
Mr. Owens?
Yes.
Mrs. Stubbs?
Yes.
Mrs. Winters?
Yes.
Mr. Minio?
Yes.
Mrs. Strato? Yes. Mr. Mercado?
Yes. We did not receive any GT Gov, eGov access emails. We'll now have our second public portion. A reminder, 5-minute time period, and a 30-minute overall time period. Anyone wishing to speak, please raise your hand. Mr. Crew.
Paul Krug, Blackwood. Which of the following 3 Blackwood improvement efforts is this council actively overseeing? The Blackwood West redevelopment plan, the Blackwood Arts District, or the Village of Gloucester Township?
That would be an administrative task. Council is not responsible for actively overseeing those 3.
Understood, not asking the day-to-day operations, asking oversight of the entities like the EDC and Triad Associates.
Those are administrative functions. That's the
Of those
administration.
organizations, they
Absolutely.
oversee themselves.
Now, the administration works with them.
What administration is that?
The administration of Gloucester Township. On the legislative side, not the administrative side.
Can you be
So,
specific as to who that would be?
Mayor's office, Mr. Cardis, Mr. Lechner, they work with them. Would you like the answer, gentlemen?
I don't particularly, I don't sit on the.
No, he doesn't sit on it,
Development Committee, but the mayor does meet, I believe, weekly or bi-weekly with Triad and representatives of the Economic Development Committee, where they entertain prospective developers, basically, follow some of the plans that have been laid out.
If I understand you correctly, there was not an answer to those 3. So the citizens of Gloucester Township do not currently have oversight of these 3 initiatives from this representative body?
No, that's incorrect.
Could you explain?
Mr. Lechner,
I would request that time be paused if possible.
please continue.
I can at least answer to the 2 of them.
No.
If anyone
Let it run.
proposes to the redevelopment plan for the villages of Gloucester Township, it's sort of an overlay district. You have the zoning ordinance and you have the redevelopment plan. Should a developer or redeveloper want to exercise their right to go into a redevelopment standard, it would come to council in their capacity as a redevelopment entity, so they would have an oversight in that capacity to issue a redevelopment agreement. Same holds true for Blackwood West redevelopment plan. Anybody who's doing development of any sort in Blackwood West that requires planning board approval, they would have to go to council in their capacity as a redevelopment entity for a redevelopment agreement.
Okay, so for Blackwood West, what specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals have been set for the initiative?
I would just refer you to the redevelopment plan,
I've taken a look.
which has goals and objectives.
Okay,
And we're looking at the redevelopment plan again. There is a proposal for that.
how are the day-to-day implementers, such as the EDC and Triad Associates, assessed against the aforementioned goals? Stated differently, what are the performance evaluation criteria for these organizations?
I would have to let Triad answer that.
Would it be possible to have Triad Associates show up or a representative to speak to this body? Questions are persistent.
Requests can be made, but they
Appreciate
also,
that.
again, they also meet with the mayor's office and Mr. Lechner.
Appreciate that. I wanted to ensure that these questions from the previous meeting on December 9th were recorded and answered for the public. With the regard to behavior of select council members on December 9th, I would leave you with this. One of our first president's quotes on leadership. First, you listen, then you learn, then you help, and only then do you lead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Krug. Is there anyone else? Mr. Sweet?
Sam Sweet from Ariel. My first question is, I didn't hear Mr. Lechner say, with the regards to rehabilitation, you said they're entitled to tax abatements and they're not allowed to. I didn't hear that second part. When Mr. Krug asked for the difference between redevelopment and rehabilitation,
Eminent domain, condemnation.
that's for redevelopment.
Yes.
But for rehabilitation, you said they're entitled to tax abatements, and then you said something else. That they're not allowed to do 35 years or something? I couldn't quite hear it.
Well, I'm generalizing, just so you know, I'm generalizing. But
Okay.
the rehabilitation area criteria is not as stringent as the redevelopment area. But the rehabilitation area, when it was designated, I think in the early 80s, late 70s, all of Gloucester Township was designated as a rehabilitation area, and that's what allows the tax abatement township-wide. The redevelopment area allows for a longer-term tax abatement and allows for a long-term pilot payment in lieu of taxes. I don't know if that's ever been exercised. At least there hasn't been, to the best of my knowledge, since I've been there. And it also allows the town the power of condemnation. But the redevelopment area that we're seeking to study, we are not seeking that area to be a condemnation area. It is a non-condemnation area. Because of case law, now we have to, the township has to specifically designate whether or not we're going to seek condemnation power or non-condemnation. We have to give notice to those property owners of that fact. So this area that Ms. Coyne had mentioned, or that's part of the resolution, is a non-condemnation area.
Okay, thank you. With regards to being the entire township being rehabilitation, at the last meeting, I asked the question if we could designate certain areas of the township, and I was told that no, it's all or nothing. According to the statute 40A:21, and also the Boxer report, council, or you can make ordinance referring to eligibility criteria, which includes type of structures, types of permissible improvements, qualifying geographic zones, or even similar designations. So my question is, why is council, I know the law was set in the mid-80s, as Mr. Lechner just said, but have we thought about maybe revisiting it as per the Boxer report, doing a periodic review and saying that certain areas should not be up for rehabilitation? Because you can do that according to the statute. So you can designate Blackwood Clementon Road for rehabilitation, but not the Black Horse Pike. You can even designate saying no retail for rehabilitation.
The Boxer report you're referencing, that's the former treasurer? with
Yes.
Recommendations, correct?
Recommendations, yes.
Recommendations, okay. You want to speak? Yes.
The comments that were made about the township-wide and the fact that it could not be waived were directed at the tax abatement program, not at the rehab. It was an abatement. If you check the record of the meeting, the abatements were what we were talking about. We said you cannot discriminate upon anybody individually by areas of the town. It had to be applied uniformly throughout the town.
Yes, but if you designate a portion of the town for rehabilitation, you can designate another portion not for rehabilitation, which then would make that area of the town. For example, if you designate,
That's not what we were talking about.
that's exactly what we were talking about.
You check the record, because I recall the conversation differently. We were talking about the abatement and whether the abatement could be applied.
No,
in certain areas
I
or not.
specifically asked the question of if the ordinance was all or nothing. And the answer was, it has to be all or nothing. And in fact, Mr. Palumbo had said that as well, as he's shaking his head yes. So the ordinance, which you guys have designated to be all or nothing, we're following, and I understand that. But you can also change that ordinance at the next meeting, make a motion and change that ordinance to designate certain areas. Is that,
Not on the abatements, is what I'm saying.
not on the abatement if the area is for rehabilitation, but you can change for Gloucester Township not to be the entire township for rehabilitation. You can designate certain areas. Is that correct?
I'm going to let Mr. Palumbo chime in.
Just real quick, you have to reapply to the state, and the state has to give you approval. You have to go through a very large process. The council cannot just objectively say, we don't want this part, or that part. They have to apply. The law that you state is correct, but it also allows for procedure and for the state in order to allow you to designate. And it's not just areas that need physical rehabilitation, it's economic rehabilitation, and things along those lines. So, and part of the factor when we did do the entire township was the fact that we have limited access on certain properties to be developed commercially. And that's one of the reasons why the state actually felt at that time for us to do the entire town, as they are doing the entire towns in the general area. So it really does depend on how much of a report council would want to get into to send to the state to say, look, we're not going to designate the entire town anymore. We only want to designate certain sections. I don't know whether the town would want to do that, but that would be an option if you would so desire and go against what the state had recommended back in the 80s.
Thank you, Mr. Palumbo, and thank you, Mr. Sweet. Your time's up.
Can I come back if there's time?
If we have time available. Is there anyone else? Mr. Heimball.
Heinball, Morningstar Court. Another, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't another distinction between rehabilitation area and redevelopment the fact that you can rezone a redevelopment area with easier, with less? Is there a difference between the two on changing the zoning designation of an area? Is that a difference between the two areas? That's just was a question I had.
It's not a zone. Zoning is power, the zoning power. It's a different statute. That's the municipal land use law.
Right.
This is redevelopment, local redevelopment housing law. So it's not really zoning, it's redevelopment or rehabilitation. So in a rehabilitation area, you could have a redevelopment plan. But within that redevelopment plan, you cannot condemn property, and you cannot give payments in lieu of taxes long term.
Yeah. Okay, I understand.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is, in a rehabilitation area, we could create redevelopment plans that are not specifically zoning.
Okay,
It's similar.
I didn't ask my
It's
question
similar,
well,
but
but
they're
that's
not
okay. I get the gist of what you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lechner.
You're welcome.
I'm back on resolution 345. So it's been recommended we do this study. What is beyond the study? What are our township's plans for this new zone beyond the study? I'm sure we're not just doing a study for the fun of a study. I'm sure there's a longer vision involved on why we're doing that dictates why we're doing this study.
Mr. Lechner, do you want to address that as well?
Well, we're in the infancy of that. Once the redevelopment plan is studied for the area, the redevelopment is studied. If it supports the redevelopment plan, then a redevelopment plan would be implemented. We're looking at that particular area along the Blackwood Pike. We're looking at Blackwood West. That whole corridor, quite frankly, from Elmonesson Road south to College Drive. That whole Route 168 corridor.
So this,
The zoning that's been there has been there for many, many years. Master plan's been adopted in 1999. It's been re-examined twice. It's time to, look at.
so that area is already, this area that's being studied is already an area of rehabilitation. So it already can be approved for a tax abatement. So what?
Yeah.
So what are we trying to?
That's what we're trying to figure out also. What is gonna, that's what planning is. What do we want to see there? How can we get there? And then if it's not working, we need to revisit it. And that's what we're doing with Blackwood West.
Okay.
Blackwood West redevelopment plan was adopted in 2004. So been 15 years, so we're looking at it. We've had some success.
Okay.
But not 100%.
Okay, thank you. And just a little clarification, I'm going to state a hypothetical, this eligible for tax abatement that you seem to be stumbling around. Just a hypothetical, if tomorrow council decided we're going to undesignate the whole town as area in need of rehabilitation, and maybe just redesignate area of rehabilitation, just Blackwood Clemington Road, and that's it, the whole town, just hypothetically. Does that mean if a business went on across Keys Road, for example, hypothetically, that they would have to be eligible for a tax abatement under what way you just described it?
My understanding is yes. Once you adopt the program exists for all. Correct?
You'd have to change the program.
You would have to eliminate it.
Well, you have to apply to the state anyway, you have to get approval.
Change what program? I'm sorry,
Current abatement that exists right now, you would have to reapply.
So abatement program is independent from a planning rehabilitation designation.
You're talking two different
Yeah,
statutes and
right.
two
That's what
different separations, correct? But with what you have to allow tax abatement is you set up an area in order to get people to come and build projects, you know, and give them a tax break, so to speak. Or what we have is a tax phase-in, which is really probably easier to have. But in order, if you want to eliminate that and then just maybe reapply to the state for only certain designated areas, I think you're defeating the whole entire purpose. I mean, there's not that many that are coming in that we work with. I mean, the entire township, which is what everybody else does, probably.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heimbaugh. Is there anyone else? Ms. Coyne is yet to speak.
Ms. Coyne, Choose Landing. Forgive me for being thick, but I'm confused. I read the Boxer report, and the Boxer report states that the state has essentially no oversight and monitoring of granting of individual tax abatements in New Jersey. And that's a quote from page 8. And it also says that basically there's general rules that are set by the state, and then the municipality adopts an ordinance which defines all the criteria regarding the abatements.
Correct. But the state doesn't monitor and the state doesn't approve each individual abatement. The town does. The town has that option as to what they want to offer, assuming somebody comes in and wants to build a new project, they follow the proper procedure and applications, then that goes to council. But the ability to grant that has to be allowed by the state. You have to make applications to the state. They tell you you can do it and offer it.
Based on the township's ordinance.
Well, the township sets an ordinance based on what the state allows.
Right, but this says that the state has very little oversight. The state essentially says that you can do it, and then the township sets all the rules for doing it.
Well, the state says you can do it once you give them the criteria for them to allow it. They just don't just rubber stamp everything. You have to give them a presentation
Right,
in order to do it.
Okay, from what I read, it basically said that there's only 20 municipalities in the entire state that have used tax abatements like we do, like the entire township.
I don't think so. There's
Well, that's-
500
it's-
some odd municipalities.
Yeah, there's
I can't
20
believe
20
it's
townships, it says in the Boxer report. And it says that the township basically has control over the criteria for who gets a tax abatement and who does not. And it states that tax abatement should be used sparingly and that there should be analysis done establishing whether the tax abatement is good for the township and not good for the township. And, basically it's saying that it's the townships, under the township's control.
Ms.
Right.
Coyne, Ms. Coyne, Mr. Boxer, Matthew Boxer, correct. How old is that report?
I believe it is from 2010.
And he was the treasurer under the Christie
He
administration.
was a controller.
Okay, he's the controller.
Right.
Okay, and Governor Christie
It's their opinion.
has,
And I was
those are
actually-
recommendations,
Yeah, but I was
exactly.
actually interviewed
Governor
for
Christie
that,
has
too.
championed
So
tax
I'm
It
evasion.
states that in
aware of
here.
it.
It
Some
states
of
that.
our neighbors in the South Jersey area.
Opinion driven.
That was opinion driven recommendation, but go ahead, continue.
Yeah, it actually states that they spoke to you, not directly to you in the report, but a representative from Gloucester Township.
That
And
was
Gloucester Township is actually cited as one of the townships that basically, I think they're saying is overusing the abatements. And it talks about giving Wawa tax abatements, and there's several Wawas within 2 miles of each other. And, that not every municipality in New Jersey does that. And it does make recommendations that if, the tax abatements have been in place for a period of time, that should be revisited to decide whether or not it's still a good thing for the township. And as far as this redevelopment area that we're talking about on the agenda tonight, I'm wondering why we have to consider that as an area in need of redevelopment when it's surrounded by areas in need of redevelopment. Seems to me that if these areas in need of redevelopment that are already on the books get redeveloped, this should be prime real estate. Don't you think?
That's why we're doing a study.
But that's costing us money. Seems like logic and common sense would dictate if it's being surrounded by areas that are already redevelopment areas that could be improved upon, why do we need to pay somebody to tell us that this is going to end up being prime real estate?
The uses of it and smart planning going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Mr. Sweet.
Sam Sweet from Ariel. I'd like to get some clarification.
Before you start, if anyone has an interest, because I did stop the clock. I did spend 9 years on the planning board, and I was sitting there as a council liaison with Mr. Leckman. I learned a lot at the planning board. Mr. Owens was the chairman of the planning board and served on it for about 4 or 5 years. Mr. Hutchinson's currently on it. But if anyone in the audience is interested, it seems there's a lot of redevelopment questions and planning questions. There is always openings available on the planning and zoning board. Send a resume in. And if you have interest in it, why are you looking at me that way, Mr. Sweet?
Okay, I don't think I'd be accepted onto the planning board if I sent a
You
resume.
never know. You miss all the shots that you don't take. Start the clock.
Okay. Wayne Gretzky. Just for clarification on Mr. Palumbo's point, the ordinance can be rewritten. You have to petition the state to rewrite the ordinance. Council would have to rewrite the ordinance and then apply to the state. So it could be done.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so is that something council would consider? And before I get the answer to that question, where I'm going with this is, right now, by having the entire township an area for rehabilitation, there's no incentive for any businesses to want to go to Blackwood Clementon Road as opposed to the prime real estate area right around College Drive where you have the outlets, you have Sam's Bar and Grill, that area is being redone, and also College Drive as well as the new Dave & Buster's. So there's going to be a high traffic area. But yet, as Mr. Lechner said in the last meeting, Blackwood Clementon Road is one of the most traveled roads in the township. Is that correct?
Yes.
So right now, if I'm a new business coming in, I'm going to look at where I can get the best bang for my buck, which is going to go to the high traffic area or the prime real estate, as opposed to a high traffic area where there's a Pep Boys, McDonald's. There's no reason for people to go there other than high traffic. And if I can save money on the prime real estate as opposed to Blackwood Clementon Road, I think it's
their rent per square footage may be cheaper on Blackwood Clementon Road.
might be, but
Location, you have several apartment complexes that surround those particular areas there. I thought of you guys when I was driving down Route 30 yesterday. I went to take a trip to the Berlin Mart because I heard you can get batteries for your key fobs there for $2. And it's true. But I took a look at all of the plazas, on Route 30. Take a look at it. Spend some time, and I was Sunday driving. Take my time
Can we
there.
stop the clock, by the way, while you're,
And they're vacant. No, keep it. And they're vacant. So, you know, we have a high traffic area here. You may get cheaper rent. You know, there's some businesses that are located in some of these plazas that have stayed there because of the rent, the high traffic area, the residents around them, the apartment complexes. It's going to depend on what that person or that business operator is interested in.
so would council though consider redoing their ordinance to designate certain areas of rehabilitation as opposed to the whole township?
We could talk about it at our workshop, but I'm speaking for myself. I don't want to give you an answer here. This is something that, you know, 4 people are bringing to my attention of how it's needed, or perhaps to think about it. So
But it can
perhaps
be
I
done,
can put it on
correct?
the agenda. Excuse me?
It can be done.
Yeah, you want to consider new projects. You got to understand, this is not something for just whatever's there.
No, I understand. I'm just saying, but it can be done. And just for clarification, if the areas for rehabilitation, whoever applies there, as long as they fill out the paperwork correctly, gets the tax abatement. Because we can't discriminate on a tax abatement if the area is already done for rehabilitation, unless it's an ordinance.
If council decides that there's an issue or something and they don't follow proper procedure or something along those lines, council has an option to not vote on. That's why there's an ordinance. And that's why there's a public hearing.
But
on
the
each
ordinance can be changed.
No, I'm just talking about for each individual project. So if a project comes through and they don't follow proper procedure, or there's some kind of an issue, which we haven't had any over the last 30-some years, but they do have the right, I guess, to vote no on those ordinances for each individual project. That's why each project has to come through council for an ordinance and a public hearing. So if somebody brings some through that there's some kind of an issue, they would probably want to look into it.
But council can change that ordinance.
Well, the master ordinance is what you're talking about.
Yes, the master ordinance. They can change the master ordinance. It would go to the state would approve it, and then they could designate certain areas,
They would have to make new application to change it.
but it could be done.
It is feasible that it could be done, but would it get approved? We don't know. It would have to be a study.
Would you recommend doing that?
No, absolutely not.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Palumbo.
last question. Where do I send my resume?
Oh, you can send that to the mayor's office, or you can send it to me.
Glowtwip?
Yeah, Blue.
All right. Happy holidays, everyone. Merry
Well,
Christmas.
Sam. And this will be our last speaker of the evening, Mr. Krug.
I did request this, but I do want to formally request that either Triad Associates or the EDC potentially send a member to this chamber for a meeting to better explain the specific goals of some of these initiatives. Mr. Lechner told me to take a look at the Blackwood West redevelopment plan for the plan objectives. And so I'll take these to be the specific goals. My question would be, how has the township executed on the parking goal in the downtown Blackwood area?
Mr. Lechner, I can't comment on that. Mr. Lechner, you have a plan in front of you that I don't have access to. I don't read it.
I'd have
Often.
to defer to maybe the next meeting,
Okay, thank you.
because I don't know.
Mr. Krug, with some of your questions, if they're more in depth, then maybe you could send that ahead of us and then we could take a look at it.
Sure,
Give your
I've
response.
made mention of the Blackwood West redevelopment
No, but
plan
your
half a
question,
dozen times
your
at
question
this
regarding
point.
parking, sir. Go ahead, next.
How has the township executed on the gateway, anchor, and mixed retail in downtown Blackwood West redevelopment plan?
I respectfully would request that you put your questions in an email to me. You have an email address, so I could evaluate that. So I'm looking at, I have to look at all the planning board.
I agree, Mr. Lechner.
Mr. Lechner asked me to use this as the specific goals. That's simply what I'm doing. This plan has been out in the public for 15 years. Where is the young nester and young professional housing that was dictated as a goal of this initiative?
Again, if you could forward those questions to us beforehand, we would be able to answer them for you.
Okay. Record shows no answers to any of the questions for the specific goals.
Just
Thank
for my
you.
information, are you reading from the plan? Is that what he's reading from, Mr. Lechner?
Yes, he
Plan-
is.
Plan of recommendations of to what should be in the redevelopment zone.
Absolutely. That is what he's reading from. At least that was more productive than the last meeting. We'll close the second public portion. Polling the directors.
Mr. Barlow.
Nothing to report.
Mr. Cardis.
Merry Christmas.
Mr. Lechner.
I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Chief Harkins.
Just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Mr. Chadwell.
Merry Christmas, thanks.
Mr. Hutchison.
Merry Christmas to everybody here, and thank you in the back, my Cub Scout friend Boy Scout friend for coming this evening.
Mr. Owens.
Thanks for coming out. Thanks for the Gloucester Township Police Department for keeping us safe as always. Tonight's the second night of Hanukkah, so happy Hanukkah to my fellow members of the tribe. Happy holidays to everyone else, and Happy New Year.
Mrs. Stubbs. Happy holidays to everyone. Have a safe holiday. Mrs. Winters.
I wish everyone a safe holiday and a happy holiday. Enjoy the time you spend with your families.
Mr. Mignon.
Mr. Krug, I like that statement you made that George Washington had presented. Did it go first listen, then learn, then lead? Is that how it went? Okay. Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy holidays and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Mrs. Strato.
I want to thank Gloucester Township Police, the community outreach, and the residents of Glendora. Last night, they had their house decorating contest, the completion of it with a block party, and it was very well attended, and it was nice to see the residents of Glendora come out and support it. I will make a statement and say that it's a shame that those that live in Glendora that choose to use some of the social media factors out there to say such negative comments. It's a shame that they weren't there to enjoy the festivities and be a part of something so positive. But thank you, Chief, to your men and women and to the residents of Glendora. And in response to Mr. Krug's statement, Orlando, thank you for your leadership. I think you do an excellent job in allowing us and you leading us by listening and responding. So thank you for your leadership. Happy Hanukkah to everyone. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Mr. Mercado.
I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. Mr. Lechner, I want to thank you very much for answering the questions of our residents. And you do it in such a kind manner and very informative. And I always appreciated that about you, Mr. Lechner. Also, Mr. Palumbo, thank you for responding. And that's a lovely shirt you have on this evening. But I also want to thank our fire departments for visiting all our neighborhoods with Santa. Santa came through my neighborhood about a half hour before I came to our meeting. I want to thank for our fire departments for continuing to do that throughout our township. January 3rd is reorganization here. It's a Friday evening at 6 o'clock. The individuals that are reelected will be sworn in along with a president and vice president of our council for the 2020 year. With that, I wish everyone a wonderful holiday, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Just let me look to see.
There was a fire last
Coming back, right?
No, gotcha, no, it's the autumn bridge. No, take care. Yep.
cars are going up and down every street?
Just about.
Have a nice holiday.
That's a lot. That's a lot of streets. A lot of streets. Merry Christmas.